record this.
Can you see the presentation?
Yeah, we can.
Okay, awesome.
Hey, Julia.
Hi, Mary.
All right, we're gonna give it a few minutes just to let more people trickle in. This is being recorded, so this will be sent out afterwards, but hope everyone's having a great start to their Thursday.
Yes, it is almost the weekend and it is almost the end of May. Like, that's crazy.
I know.
Ty, how's everything on your side of the world?
I don't even know. Settling. I don't know what the world is right now, but it's settling. We're doing all right.
Awesome. And congratulations again on your more than well-deserved promotion.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Been a long road.
Yeah.
And this is going to be a smaller session today, just because it was only open to Chezie customers. So thanks everyone for joining. I'll continue to monitor the waiting room, but we can go ahead and get started. So, hey everyone, for those who don't know me, I'm Egbuna. I'm the co-founder and CMO of Chezie. And today we have a really great webinar all around taking a deep dive into ERG metrics. We want you all to be able to leverage data in order to get additional resources, additional funds, whatever it is that you need to maximize impact for your ERGs. I actually won't be presenting. We have the amazing Sharita Marshall joining us today, who will be leading the presentation. And while we're doing the presentation, this is meant to be really interactive. So if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. We can stop and pause and just take a moment to talk about it. And everyone feel free to, come on camera, come off mute. This is meant to be more of a dialogue as opposed to like a formal webinar. So I'll pass it over to Sharita. Thanks everyone again for joining.
Thank you so much for that great introduction. So hello everyone and welcome to today's presentation. Again, my name is Sharita Marshall. I am founder of Visionary Development Consulting, where I focus on ERG strategies. So I am so excited to have this conversation because I find with my clients, it's been having this conversation with MB at a lot of people are like, what should we track? How should we track it? How can we get momentum going and buy-in? So this conversation is really geared towards one, understanding why it's important to track your progress, what metrics you should be looking for, and how to leverage that data for your key stakeholders. So jumping right in, why is it important to track your ERG progress? ERGs are essential tools. Oops, wrong direction. ERGs are essential tools for promoting diversity, equity, and inclusion within your organization. They are there to create safe spaces for underrepresented and marginalized groups, while also providing personal and professional development opportunities and platforms for conversation around difficult issues. They often can serve as a bridge between management and employees, providing valuable insights for diverse perspectives, needs, and experiences within the organization. So a couple of areas that are beneficial for tracking ERG progress is identifying areas of improvement. When you're tracking progress, you're able to identify any challenges or barriers that are faced by the ERG, such as resources, inadequate representation, or difficulty influencing decision-making. This is where you can use this information to address issues directly and improve the efficacy and impact of your ERGs. This also can help with measuring the impact of diversity and inclusion by monitoring key metrics, as demographics of ERG participation and leadership opportunities. You can assess the degree to which ERGs are fostering diversity and inclusion, as well as track qualitative impacts, such as any changes in company culture, and the quality of internal dialogues around DEI and employee feedback around their experiences in the workplace. When you're assessing the effectiveness of ERG initiatives, tracking is key. So this is the way that you can measure the impact of specific initiatives. So you can see either what went wrong, what went right, or what you can do to improve the either project itself or the initiative. And this also can help inform decision-making and resource allocation. You can use the data, for example, if you are trying to drive diverse promotions, you can use that data to warrant additional resources, sponsorship or mentorship for these diverse team members. And conversely, if you're struggling with either an initiative or a project, you can see if one, the project or initiative should be continued, or if you just need different avenues of support and resources, i.e. leadership buy-in, additional funding, so on and so forth. And then with tracking progress, you do create an atmosphere of accountability and transparency. Regularly reporting on your ERGs makes people accountable because you're essentially saying, hey, this is what we were able to do, giving these resources, this support, this allocation, and we weren't able to achieve our goals because of X, Y, and Z, or we were able to achieve our goals, and we can go even further with additional support, funding, etc. So again, tracking ERG progress is to your benefit because it does give not just the transparency and accountability, but it does show the efficacy and impact of your ERG program. Now, what metrics should you track? I always get this question, like, well, what should we be looking at? The key is that your key metrics should be based off of your ERG program goals, which are connected to your organization's OKR and KPIs. Essentially, what's measured is what matters. So for example, an organization KPI could be to increase representation and leadership by 10%. The ERG program goal is to provide professional development opportunities to diverse talent, which would impact that representation and leadership by 10%. The ERG metrics are the number of professional development activities. So this again shows leadership, shows the executive team that the activities, initiatives, program goals that are within the ERG program are directly connected to the organization business outcomes via quantitative and qualitative goals. This shows the direct impact of the program to the organization. So this therein lies shows that, hey, you're not just throwing at something. There is a connection, and this doesn't just exist to exist. This is a program that is to directly impact the organization's bottom line.
I'd love to pause here. Since we have a smaller group, this can kind of be almost like an open discussion. Do you all already have ERG metrics that you're tracking? And if so, are they kind of based off of this framework in which they're tied to organizational KPIs, or how did you determine those?
That's an awesome question. If you don't mind me like jumping in. Yeah, I feel like we like the way I even like how the slide is organized, because the short answer is no. Like, I don't know that there's a written top down, like coming from leadership, we want to do this. I think that there is like some soft objectives. Like, yeah, generally we want to do better around these ERG programs. We want to have them. It's like a lot easier to do the bottom end of the funnel, or the top end of the funnel, I should say, bottom end of the slide. Like, yeah, how many like events are we holding? Like, we definitely track that, and like engagement on that front. But again, like the reason I love that you've laid it out is like really like what's the bigger purpose? Like, that's what we really need to tackle at our firm. If I'm not speaking out of turn here, like, you know, leadership needs to come together and be like, okay, this is the ultimate goal, and then these activities are like in support of that.
Sure.
So I would say if I were being self-critical, I'd say it's kind of lacking.
Sharita,
And one way to do that, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say one way to do that, because that's what I ran into when I was a global ERG leader, is that I wasn't given this direction. So what I did was that I looked at the organization's year goals and I created my program goals based off of those. So one of them was to increase a diverse talent pool. There was no quantitative number to that. It just was like, hey, we just want to increase this. And I pushed back and said, well, how much of a percentage increase would be impactful? Like, what are you guys looking for? And that's one thing that I recommend that you do, is that if there's nothing quantitative, then push back on that, because your responsibility is to show impact. You can't show impact on qualitative all the time, because that would be like, well, did you though? Is it really impactful? You have to be able to quantify something. So if you push back and they're still not giving you anything, then take a number, an arbitrary number that you think is reasonable, and then cut it by 75%, and then say, hey, you want to increase the diverse talent pool, we can add to the diverse talent pool by 3% over in the next year. Just do it like that. And then especially if they haven't given any quantifiables, they can't push back and say, oh, that's too small. You didn't even have any. So they'll take whatever you give. But if you say 3% and you can actually perform at 5%, then they're like, hey, that's amazing. So pick a number, and then again, just cut it by 75%, because you want to make it really, really small. So if you meet it, great. If you exceed it, great. But you don't want to make it realistic, because in case you don't meet it, they're like, well, look at you, you didn't do anything. So definitely kind of take that initiative to quantify it if you're not given any quantifiable goals, because that will show impact. And what you're essentially trying to do is to show the impact of the program on a quantifiable scale, because you can give all the qualitative information you want, but if they're not seeing a direct impact to the bottom line, that buy-in is still like, eh.
I wanted to add as well, our for a different ERG metric in the same line as this, our overall corporate goals was to increase representation in senior leadership by to 40%. We wanted to get to 40%. And so one of the ways that we did that was, instead of the number of professional development activities, we tasked our ERGs and the leaders with getting the information out and encouraging their constituencies to participate in the leadership programs that we already have. So more about raising awareness and encouraging them to join, helping them to fill out the applications if need be. So one of the things that we're trying to track is how many people from the ERGs applied and then accepted to the development programs that we have within our organization, and using that as a metric. So similar, but just a slight shift.
Yeah. And then another thing that you want to do with the metric is that you want to be very clear on the definition of the metric. So let's just take this one. We have as an example, the number of professional development activities. You want to say the number of professional development activities for ERG members, because the whole professional development activities are open for the whole organization, but you want to focus on how many members for each ERG are going to these professional development activities. So you want to be able to make sure that you have a clear definition of it, because 9 times out of 10, they're going to be like, well, number of professional development activities. Okay, well, how many of your ERG members went? And of that, how many were actually ERG members? Things like that. So you want to have a clear definition. And then you also want to set a benchmark. If you don't have any past metrics, let's say for if you had not been tracking how many professional development activities you have during a year, then create that number based off of what you're currently doing and have that as your benchmark. Again, you can explain like, this is the first time we're tracking it, so we're using this year's activities as our benchmark to move forward. But you do want to be able to say you have a benchmark, whether it's something in the past or what you're currently using, because you have to be able to show progress or stagnation in some form or another. And again, it has to go back to those organization OKRs and KPIs. Whether or not it is quantifiable, you create a quantifiable metric to it and just show how you actually directly impact the bottom line. Any other thoughts or questions or comments? Nope. Okay. Well, thank you for that. That was
One
really-
question,
Mhm.
Sharita. So do you recommend that each ERC has their own metrics? Or like overall, like, because we are just starting, right? And we have different ERCs group, ERGs group. So do you recommend that each ERGs has their own metric, or like overall, we can talk about number of professional development activities for all the different members of our groups?
So it depends. I say that it depends because for me, I recommend it based off of the size of the ERGs and the maturity of the ERG program. If you're just starting out, I recommend the program holds all of the metrics and the individual ERGs hold the activities and projects that that are going to meet that individual program goal.
Mhm.
So if you want to do, let's say, 30 professional development activities as your program goal, each ERG is responsible for, having professional development activities. And whether you want to divide that 30 up by each individual ERG, and let's say you have 3, so 10, 10, and 10, or you just want them to focus on participating in the professional development activities, you can do that as well. But I would suggest it based off of the program goal, maturity of the program itself, and the number or size of the ERGs. So since you're just starting out, I would recommend that you have that quantifiable goal as your program goal, and then make sure that the individual ERG activities are leading to bringing those goals to fruition. So making sure that they are actively promoting professional development activities and pushing their team members to participate in those activities.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. All right, so how to leverage data with your key stakeholders. Let's just keep going backwards. Okay, so interpreting data to demonstrate value. For this part, it is imperative that you have a standard operating procedure or practices around metrics for your ERG program, so that there is consistency with data measurement, meaning that however you are going to, the metrics that you're going to measure, how you're going to collect the data, and how you're going to analyze and interpret the data has to be standard for the program. So if you are expecting your ERG leads to make sure that they're taking count for the activities, making sure that they are submitting proposals or projects, however that works for you, you should have a standard operating procedure so that every ERG under the program does the same thing, because you want to compare apples to apples and oranges to oranges, not pineapples to bananas. So you need to create that SOP so everyone understands what the metrics are, how you're collecting the data, how you're analyzing the data, and how you plan to present it. So that's key for everyone, just to have transparency and accountability, but to also understand how the data is going to work for them, so that they are making sure that they are pushing those projects and initiatives, they are supporting the program goals and doing what they need to do as leaders in order to make sure that the program goals are effective, because they know how that's going to impact them as an ERG leader. So starting off with identifying the relevant metrics. Again, it always comes back down to making sure you have identified the metrics that are relevant to measuring the effectiveness of your ERGs. And then gathering and organizing that data. You can do this by surveys, analyzing employee data, HR metrics, or Chezie. Like you have to make sure that you have a way to gather and organize the data, and then make sure that you're creating documentation around it. Because if you are not doing it, or like, let's say you hire someone to do it, or you're on vacation, you need to make sure that people understand how to gather and organize the data. And then when analyzing the data, You want to look for identifying trends and patterns. You want to look for areas where your ERGs have had positive impact, such as an increase in employee engagement, increase in retention rates, an increase in diversity within the organization. Not everything is going to be, rainbows and unicorns and roses, but you do want to look for that positive pattern. So even if it's a 1% positive pattern, or you see a very minute or minuscule pattern for success, you can use that and say, hey, if we had X, Y, and Z, this could be exponential, or this could grow. But this is what we're seeing based off of how we started. So you definitely want to be able to look for those trends and patterns. And then presenting their findings to your stakeholders. Most stakeholders do not want to read. They just want to be told the information. So making it clear and concise and using visualizations such as graphs and charts are always the best way to illustrate your point. They don't want to read a paragraph. They don't want to look at, data synapses. They don't want to look at all this other stuff. They don't want to. They don't really care. They're just like, does it work? How is it working? And what do you want? So just make it really concise as possible and use those visual aids to show how the ERGs are contributing to the success of the organization. And then consistently monitor and adjust. I do recommend for my clients that when you have your program goals, that you are looking at them every quarter to see how you are trending towards your goals, what's working, what's not working, what you should start, stop, continue, so on and so forth. So make sure you are constantly monitoring your metrics, because you might recognize that there's something that is just really not working, and by the end of the year, it's just not going to work out. So you might want to adjust that goal, remove the goal, or something like that, because again, you want to come out with a positive impact of the ERGs. And so by monitoring regularly and often, you can see what's working and what's not working. So I want to stop here to see, have you guys started with your data, using it, creating, your information for your stakeholders? And if you have, like, what type of responses you've gotten from sharing the data? No takers? No
I
problem.
actually don't think anyone on this call's portal has launched.
Okay.
Soon they will have access to this data that they can start to report up. But
Okay, got it.
yeah.
No worries. So this is really, so since you guys are starting, this is really a good sweet spot for you, because now you can have the idea of, okay, here are the metrics we need to start measuring, and then being on it so that you are, again, looking for those trends and patterns so that you can create a really compelling case for your ERG program. And then, I'm sorry, you had a question?
Yes, so or more like a thought. At the moment we do present that information to leadership or different stakeholders. I think that at least on our case, something that could be useful is to have an industry average or metrics or something to compare to the rest of the organizations. Like, I am thinking, for example, we are just launching the different ERGs, right? But we would like to tell the leadership team that our employee participation is X, and compared to the industry is good or not, So just I thought that it would be nice to have something to compare against, so that we can show how we are doing.
Yeah, and I know Chezie is one of a handful of organizations that are starting to collect that information, because prior to last year, it really was not collected, especially per industry. So people had a general idea, but it was nothing directly connected specifically to ERGs. They just were not collecting that data. So that's one thing that we are really proponents of, is to start creating those benchmarks, collecting that data so that we can show industry trends, we can show overall ERG trends about the efficacy of ERG programs when they're set up right, how they really can impact an organization and the industry as a whole.
Yeah, and I will say that we're actually working on a state of the ERGs report right now, and that's gathering data from our users, but also people who have taken our ERG movement model assessment. So we're going to start to provide some of those benchmarks in terms of where people are in their ERG journey. So that'll be coming out soon.
Great, thank you.
Yeah. So our goal is to move forward from like this time frame. Moving forward, we'll have those benchmarks so that the comparisons can be done. But definitely that is something that would really be impactful for you in your presentation. Okay, so moving over to how to advocate for more resources with data. So there are several ways that you can do that. And this is not saying that, hey, you have to do all of this at once, but this is just saying like, these are different points that you can use to advocate for different resources, particularly buy-in from the organization. So again, it goes back to identifying those key metrics, making sure that those metrics are relevant and showcase the impact of the ERGs and are directly connected to the organization's bottom line. Having that organizational alignment. People can have a harder time saying no to stuff when they see a direct correlation to the organization's bottom line. So making sure, again, you are showing like, hey, what we do directly impacts the organization, not just from the business outcome and goals, but also from our employees and organizational culture. Gathering the quantitative data. Now that you guys have Chezie and you're going to be starting to use it, you can use Chezie to get your quantitative data, but also leveraging your qualitative data within Chezie as well. Having those testimonies, those success stories, showing the benefits from personal experiences that you guys can share with leadership to show like, hey, these activities or these projects that we've initiated with our ERG program has had this direct impact or correlation to employees, especially with us living in this hybrid and remote world. We can show like, hey, we are still able to have that connectivity as an organization through these ERG activities. And again, creating that benchmark. Since you guys are starting with Chezie, create a benchmark now using what you have. Use the goals that you have for this year as your benchmark moving forward. So that way you can see how you're trending, where you should focus, what you should change, where your gaps are. They can help to strengthen your case by showcasing that you need additional resources or support to bridge those gaps and enhance the effectiveness and efficacy of your ERG program. And then with the visualization of the data. Chezie is so pretty. I love Chezie. It's so pretty. Everything is just right there. So you can visually see stuff, but this will also, again, help you to create that visualization for your presentation. So you can show like, hey, here's where we were. Here's how we trended up. Here's the growth. Here's the impact. You can use a lot of those. And I think you can do screenshots from your portal, correct? From your dashboard. Yeah, so you could just take those screenshots and put them together as your visualization. And then again, this will tie your metrics to ROI. If you, let's say you have a budget for your ERG program, your individual ERGs, you can say, hey, you know, from this budget, we were able to impact professional development because each member had $1,000 and they just went out and promoted this growth. And then some of them got promotions. Like you want to show the ROI from the investment, not just financial investment, but also time. You can show like, hey, your leaders put the time in order to promote the ERG activities. And so the employee engagement increased by 20%, so on and so forth. Again, that goes back to having that benchmark of where you're starting versus where you're going to end. And then presenting to, and then developing a comparing narrative. You want to use your metrics that are aligned with the organizational goal, are quantitative, qualitative, have benchmarks, have visualizations tied to the ORIs to create a compelling narrative, not just for the existence of your ERG program, but also for the investment, the buy-in, and the advocacy of your program. you want to connect the data with the real world outcomes, such as if there is an increase in the innovation, increase in employee engagement or morale, stronger team collaboration, because your ERGs, even though they're about certain groups, they go across different departments of an organization. And then also how your ERG members are brand ambassadors for your organization and showing like, hey, we believe in DEI, we believe in taking care of our team members. So that will increase the organization's brand reputation. So make sure that you can create that compelling narrative, excuse me. And then schedule a meeting to present with the senior leadership to share your metrics and your case for why you need support or how things are going with your ERG program. Tailor it to their priorities, like what are they focused on right now, and show how the ERG program can support what the leadership is focused on, what they're trying to build or trying to grow, and how ERGs are imperative to making those particular initiatives or whatever they're focused on to come to fruition. This is something that I recommend that ERG program leaders can do at least once or twice a year. Have a senior leadership meeting and do show all of this to them so that they can understand what's going on with the ERG program, because 99% of ERG programs that are within organizations, the leadership team has no idea what the ERGs are doing. They don't know like if they're connected to anything. They just know they exist. So when you're able to show that compelling narrative with the metrics, with the benchmarks and the data, that is so key to them understanding not just what you're doing, but something that I'm quite sure they have not seen before. So that's not just kudos to the program, but also kudos to you for being able to present that, because essentially you are acting as the director of a business unit and you are showing key information to leadership about how this business unit is performing. And then after you've been able to present, you do want to follow up and track progress. And this doesn't necessarily require a meeting, but if you just want to send like quarterly reports to leadership to say, hey, thank you guys for the meeting. Here's how we're trending or tracking to our goals this year. This is some support that we're looking to do. I'll follow up with X, Y, and Z about, getting whatever we need, but you want to keep it top of mind. So you don't want to just present and then they never hear from you until like another year. You want to make sure that you're showing them the progress, you're showing them what you need, you're showing them how you're directly impacting the organization. So these are the ways that you can really advocate for yourself, your program, your ERG leads, and your ERG member in a way that shows impact, but also says, hey, we are here and we are directly connected to the organization. So I'll pause here for any questions, thoughts.
I have so many in this pitch. I guess most importantly, like number 7, the ROI piece, you kind of talked about like thinking about non-financial. I guess that's the hardest one in my mind. Like, how do we like do just having examples?
So one of the things that I did was that I showed the ROI for turnover for Black employees at my organization. I was a global lead for our Black employee network. And before I took over, turnover for Black employees that were ERG members was 75%. When I took it over, I was able to increase membership and participation by 50% and reduce turnover to 25% because I was advocating for them and they saw me advocating for them and helping them to be successful in their career. And they felt like somebody actually cared. So that was one thing that I was able to have a metric and show an ROI for my time. I wasn't paid, so I couldn't show, like, hey, for this amount of money you put in. It was just like, this is the time and effort that I put into as a leader to show that, hey, I cared about my team members and I wanted them to be successful and I wanted them to have sponsorship and mentorship so that they can grow within their career within the organization. So even if you don't have the financial tie, you can tie it to activities that you're doing in order to directly impact something.
And I was going to say, kind of similar to that note, like retention, engagement, turnover, those are the things that organizations are implementing ERGs for. So if you can tie your ERGs back to those metrics, those do have a quantitative outcome. And I can actually show you some statistics, or I can send that out afterwards. But I think there's a stat that says like disengaged employees cost employers 34% of their annual salary. It's like you can kind of, do the reverse calculation and be like, hey, we've got an engagement up to this level, we're saving you X amount based off of that. So there's some backwards math you kind of have to do. We kind of have to do the similar thing with Chezie, but yeah, like I think just kind of focusing on those 3 levels of like turnover, retention, engagement, maybe some other things, but you can always kind of tie those back to quantitative numbers.
I'm actually, yeah, now that you say that, like even more explicitly, right? Like assuming all 75% of those roles like have to be backfilled, right? It costs $10,000 to hire. What's the delta between that and your average? Like if your average churn is 20%, right? Like that's like I'm just trying to think, because like sometimes when it's too abstract, like you get this like, well, opportunity costs are made up,
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. If you can, lowering talent acquisition costs is something that I tell people like go after that, because 9 out of 10 you can get a average talent acquisition cost from HR, like roughly speaking, average, how much it costs to get somebody on board them. And then that in order to replace them, it's going to cost at least 1.5 to 2 times an employee's salary to replace them. So if we lost 10 people and the average salary of those people was, let's say, $75,000, this is how much it costs for us to lose these people. But if we're doing these activities to increase employee engagement, job satisfaction, career growth, if we're able to show that, and we can decrease that, let's say, $2 million cost to $1 million or 75, something like that. You can get an average and just work with the average based off of the numbers that you have. But you still can show that. So that's why it's like it's good to be able to quantify things because that's what they pay attention to more so than anything else. But if you just don't have any type of quantifiable things, then what you have right within your ERG and say, hey, we had 5 ERG members when we started this, now we have 10. We doubled in employee engagement by 50%. Like if you can't do anything else, you can do that. And like if you don't want to say 5 to 10, you want to say you doubled employee engagement by 50% through this, then just leave it at that. So yeah.
I was thinking about that, like how probably people know this, but I don't, how to measure engagement. Like, so for what you're saying is like considering the amount of people that join an ERG. Is that a way to measure engagement?
There are a couple of ways. So you can measure engagement. That's why I talked about defining the metric. You can either define employee engagement by the number of employees that are joining the ERG, or you can define employee engagement by the number of ERG members that are participating in events. You could create the definition. So it's up to you how you want to define what employee engagement is, but you want to make sure that employee engagement definition is relevant to the organization. So if they're trying to increase employee engagement to, let's say, increase employee morale, then you can just use membership, because people that are becoming members are doing so because they want to feel good about where they are and what they do.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you're the one that sets the definition for the metric. So create the definition based off of, that connection to the organization, but then also make sure that it's something that you can measure as well. So if you want to just use increase membership, versus participation at the events. You just want to make sure there's some way for you to measure the metric that you're defining.
Mhm.
All right, anything else?
Can I squeeze one more? I'm sorry.
Oh, sure. No worries. Yeah.
So like you talk about leadership, like how do you determine like what the right level is and like what's like appropriate content for what level? So like just to give you like our acute example is like we are in that awkward growth phase where you're going from small to mid. And so you're like moving to like a more bureaucratic kind of like structure, but people still operate on the old one. So like everything gets bottlenecked, I guess is what I'm trying to say. So it's like you got to like find that balance between like informing and engaging senior leadership, right? Without like them being the ultimate decision maker on everything. You know what I'm trying to say? Like,
Yeah.
we struggle with that.
I say present everything as though you are talking to the CEO and you only have 15 minutes. Because sometimes that's their attention span. And the CEO pretty much has that high level of what's important and what matters to them, and that should trickle down to the C-suite directors, VPs and stuff like that. So what matters to them should matter to whomever you're talking to if you're not talking to the CEO. But definitely make it concise and just really present it as though you are presenting it to the CEO, because you want to show one, that direct connection to what's important to them for the overall organization. You want to make it concise, you want to make it easy to understand, and you want to give that ROI and that tie in to the organization's business outcomes. So don't necessarily focus more so on trying to tailor it all the time to your audience as far as like who you're presenting it to, outside of making sure that your presentation is connected to what they're focused on. So everything your directors and your C-suite level people are focused on are initiatives that the CEO said, hey, this is important and this is what we got to do to scale. So just focus on that, but still present it as though you're presenting it to the CEO. Does that help?
That makes sense.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, so let's just recap. We talked about the why tracking ERG progress is beneficial and key to you having a very effective and successful, sustainable, and scalable ERG program. We talked about what metrics you should be looking at, how you should be collecting those metrics, when you should be starting, which is now, and how to present your findings to your stakeholders that will be relevant to them and really impactful, showing the ROI, showing the impact, and getting those additional resources and buy-in. Because I'm quite sure for probably most or all of you, you either have a very small budget or no budget. So you're kind of just like working on a lot of stuff without a lot of resources. So coming out the gate and being able to show why you need additional resources and how you can directly impact the organization is something that will be very beneficial to you, leveraging what you're presenting to get that buy-in and those additional resources for times to come. Because, you know, starting off, a lot of times people still don't see it, they don't understand it, but once they see that consistency with those metrics and that data, they can't deny it. And if they choose not to, then that means that they are being performative and they really don't care, and then that's a whole different discussion. All right, so now I will turn it back over. And I don't know, do you want me to stop sharing my screen?
No, you can just go to the next slide. This won't take long. This is just trying to call out that you all are going to be ahead of the game with the Chezie platform. You'll automatically have access to some of these metrics that a lot of people are kind of struggling to put together now. So I think it's important prior to launching or maybe not prior to launching, but just start to think about like, what are the key metrics that we're really concerned about? What are the key metrics that our organizational leaders want to see? And then making sure you know where you can find that within Chezie. So make sure you're going to your reporting dashboard pretty often, getting a feel of like your, new joiners this month, how your ERG membership has grown, who your new members are, what the breakdown of department level office participation is within your ERGs. Just trying to make sure that you identify those metrics that your leaders are going to care about and making sure you know how to report those up. But I do think Chezie, hopefully is a good start for you all. So you're not having to search on like, how do I actually calculate this information? Now it's more so of like, how do I represent this up to leadership? And I think Sharita gave some really great tips in terms of how to analyze and identify trends within that data to make your stakeholders care about it. So, super excited to launch Chezie within each of your organizations, and hopefully we can help to secure, more resources and buy-in from the executive or leadership level.
Yeah, and I would say we come to a Q&A, but we've been doing it. Yes. Feel free to ask any additional questions. We still have time, so don't think that that's it. So
yeah. Are there any other questions for John? I see you're off mute, so.
Wow. No, I was just gonna say thank you. This is awesome. Like I'm already kind of shooting off some thoughts to the team here internally. So I appreciate it.
Great.
Yeah, I was also gonna say thank you. And luckily I am gonna be leading an ERG with John, who is the numbers guy. So very excited.
Yes, this was great. Super helpful. And it is always nice to, yes, listen to others and other experiences. And so thank you.
Great. Well, thank you all so much for joining. This was being recorded, so I'll send out the replay just so you have access to this and the deck that we provided if you want to share it within your teams. And then Sharita does offer like ERG program training. So if you're ever looking for more insights or help in terms of identifying the key things that you should be tracking, Sharita is awesome, as you can see. So feel free to reach out to her. I'll send out her info as well.
yes, and so we're here to support you guys and make sure you're successful. So if anything comes up after this call or you watch the recording, it has some additional questions, please feel free to reach out to myself or Deme, and we'll be more than happy to support you guys, because we do want you to be successful, because the whole point of doing this is to make people that are feeling marginalized or underrepresented psychologically safe in their workplace. So you guys are key to that. So we are here to support you on this journey.
All right, we will close.
Thanks so much.
Yeah, thanks y'all. Have a great rest of your Thursday.
Have a great day. Thank you guys. Bye.